Welcome. You know, in life, we know there are some things that we have control over and others not so much, right? However, we do have control over how much appreciation, authentic, sincere appreciation we show to paraprofessionals. So, if your child has had the support of this wonderful paraprofessional that was just like this ideal match for your child, shout them out in the comments. Let us know what were those characteristics of the para that just made your child click with them. Because sometimes it just seems magical, right? Today, we are going to be talking about training for paraprofessionals and some other topics too. But if you don't know me, I'll give a quick introduction. I am Charmaine Thaner. I have an adult son, Dylan, who's going to be 34 years old next month. Um, and we always advocated and we're successful, not without bumps in the road, for Dylan to be included. And one of the things that can really help students be successful in the general ed classroom is having extra adult support in the classroom. Another way that our child can be more successful in a general education classroom is having natural peer supports. So there's a variety of ways that our kids can be supported and be active learning, learners in the classroom. And today we're going to be focused on paraprofessionals because frankly, I don't talk about that the value of paraprofessionals enough. Um, and I know as a parent, sometimes you'll get home those notes from a para, and there might just be like a few things checked off that, went well that day. And then there's this long handwritten narrative. It like starts in the margin of the page and goes down to the bottom of the page. And then there's an arrow that says, flip it over because there's more narrative about everything child did wrong that day. And if these are the kinds of notes that you continue to get home, it can get very frustrating. And I think what we have to remember is for us to stop and take a moment to reflect. How much training has the paraprofessional received about behavior? How much training does the para have to say, behaviorism is not research-based? We need to be looking at other ways of supporting kids. And what we find is, well, it was a recent survey of paras across the nation, and 43% of them said they did not get enough professional development for their jobs during the year. And I was actually surprised. I thought, oh, only 43%? I would have thought it would have been higher. So we do have some schools, we need to give a shout out to those that are providing professional development for paras. And I'm going to encourage you today, whether you're a parent, an educator, a self-advocate watching us, to know that we have a voice and we can do something to help support the training of paraprofessionals. So say hi. I see we have lots of people here. Thanks for coming. Hey, Renee. Renee is an advocate in the Chicago area and is a trailblazer member of our group. Hey, Anne. And Abby's here also. So as we're going along today, like I said, I would encourage you to give a shout out to a paraprofessional that just really was such a good match for your child, and tell us what characteristics made that kind of connection. So when we're looking at training, it can be a touchy subject, right? Because we don't want people feeling like, well, you know, we don't think you know how to do your job, and I think you better go back and get some training. I mean, no one would want that, right? And instead, we need to look at this as an opportunity, as a parent, as a teacher, to have that brought up at the IEP table so we can talk about the support that paras need. And I believe there are many paras that would love for their voice to be heard at IEP meetings, right? And one of the things that we can talk about is, the para has expressed interest. They would love to know more about using this augmentative communication device that the student's using. And it's like, great, we can provide that training as a school district. Now, the catch is, if it's not written in the IEP, you know, you know what that means, right? It ain't going to happen. And there's no way to hold the district accountable for that training. So we need to look at specific areas because each para has different strengths and they have experience in different areas. So it can't be just like, this is a training we give all our paras. I mean, there are some things in common, right? That probably all paras need to know, is, being able to understand what's in the IEP and what the student is working on, what the student's strengths are. Those are common things. But there's so many individual nuances when it comes to a para providing support for your child. And that's where that training component comes in. So also let me know in the comments, do you have training written in your child's IEP for staff? Hey, Heather is another one of our Trailblazer members, and she lives in Florida. Renee says, yeah, those notes drove me crazy. I kept each one to document parental concerns and bringing forth training needs. Good, 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 good. Teresa is here from Ohio. Hey, hey, hey. And Allison says, question for when it's time. We always have time for questions. 2 big social goals are key for my son this year. The goals are for implementation across setting, including, crucially, the one-on-one aid. The SLP who leads them isn't using just one curriculum, but a mix of things. They say the aide will be attending the SLP one-on-one sessions, so she will know what to do. We also have a rubric for goals, and I'm asking for rubric data across setting twice a trimester. But how do I find out more clearly exactly what techniques she will use? And I think it might have more, but it doesn't show up here. So Allison, yes. Terrific question. And thank you for asking that. And we will go into that a little bit more today. The other thing I wanted to share with folks, if you're interested in going deeper than what we have time for today, we do have the month of September blocked out, and our focus in our Trailblazer membership group for September is to look at working and supporting paraeducators. And so I can pull up, I have a link if you're interested. If you want to know more about our Trailblazer group, you can go here. And like I said, we're going to be diving into more details, but we will also come back to your question and discuss it here today. So, the thing is, a lot of teachers and many parents don't realize that training for staff can be written into your child's IEP. Because the IEP is support for your child, but also the people that are working with your child. And so that's where you can have the discussion at IEP meetings about staff training. And it can be the educators, it can be the paras, it can be the whole team that works for your child. So look where you think those areas of need are for staff training, and really be specific about it. That you also want the paraprofessionals to be able to receive that same training that the teachers are receiving. Which brings me to a point of, wouldn't it be nice if we could pay paras, well, pay them more to begin with, right? But also pay them for professional development days. So many districts, when there's a professional development day for teachers, the paras are off contract, they don't get paid. So that's a little advocacy step you could take if you want. But yeah, there's got to be a look at the value that paras have, and the support. If they had more training, they would be more confident in their job, and I think students, right, would have that right amount of support, and be able to flourish in general ed classrooms. So that's really our big hope. Now, the other component here is, yes, there are paras that could benefit from additional training, but we also look at the other kind of factor in this variable, and that's how much training does a special education teacher have in supervising paraprofessionals. So I think most states have language around paraprofessionals are going to be supervised by a certified teacher. But do you know what that means? I mean, it's like, what does that mean? Especially if the paraprofessional is helping students in the general ed classroom, and the special ed teacher might be co-teaching down the hall with someone else. How is that special ed teacher supervising? Or is it going to be the general ed teacher's responsibility to supervise and provide support to the para? So those are things that we rarely talk about at meetings, but we really need to have a clear picture of who's going to do what. And that's going to be when we do our September training in our membership group. We have a whole training on whose job is it anyway? And when does that job have to be done? So one of the big things is, and people will say, oh, well, we don't have to put that in the IEP. And as an advocate, as a parent, I would beg to differ, because most forms for IEPs will have, that service grid where how many hours SLP is going to support, and what's it look like. And then under that is a place for a narrative that's called the optional statement of service delivery. In some states call it something else. But the whole purpose of that paragraph or whatever underneath the service grid is for everyone to have a clear understanding of what this looks like. So just saying that the SLP is going to push in for services doesn't really help us know exactly what that looks like. So more definition would help. The other thing is for paras and for the general ed teacher and the special ed teacher, they need to know who's responsible for what. I mean, is the special ed teacher assuming the para is going to make modifications to the work? Is the general ed teacher assuming the special ed teacher is going to be making modifications? It's like, who's on first? and that's another topic. That's another train. That's actually the first training session we're doing this month in our membership group. It's called Who's on First. So you see, it's not like this easy cut and dry issue, right? And so supervision is huge. I mean, I read, reports from the National Education Association, NEA, who I was a member of when I was a teacher. And, NEA has interviewed teachers, and special ed teachers are saying, like, we had zero discussion in my teacher prep program at college about supervising paraprofessionals. And there's skills that come with that supervision, right? And so teachers are saying we don't have the training to supervise. Paras are saying we don't have the training to implement. So we see how this issue comes together. And this might be something also that you talk to the special ed director in your school district and see exactly, what is what. So I'm going to pause here for a drink of water and look at your comments. And then I have some really interesting info that I dug up while I was doing some researching. So stay tuned. Yeah, fidelity of implementation. That's huge, right? I mean, you can have a well-written IEP, and if it doesn't get implemented with fidelity, it doesn't really do anybody good. All right, Angela. Angela's in Arizona. She said, yes, I have it written in my daughter's IEP. Good, good, good. And Renee says, her son Lee had a para because the teacher continued to miss his grand mal seizures. Wow. The para has a wealth of information regarding our children, and we know, according to IDEA, a parent can invite someone with knowledge regarding the student. Just a loophole I've used and continue with clients. Yeah, that's a great insight advocacy tip. As far as it's really sometimes hard. Parents will ask, for the parent to attend at an IEP meeting. And what happens a lot of times is the parent is covering for the special ed teacher who's at the IEP meeting. But the parent has so much rich information, and it really helps when they are there in person. I believe it's Connecticut that has in their state regs that paras, if invited, are required to go to IEP meetings. So that's another policy advocacy thing that you could put on your list to do, to advocate for it being in your state regs that paras are part of the team and they participate in the development of the IEP, the implementation, all that good stuff. Yeah, so, what you can do is say, I'm able to invite somebody, and now we have to figure out. And the building where I taught, the principal would have a substitute for the general ed teacher, had a substitute for the special ed teacher. So the para was free to come, but usually it was really a battle to get that to happen. So know that you will get pushback, and that's one of those things you have to keep asking for. Hey, Anne, and she says, and then how is the parent supposed to communicate with parents? Some schools forbid it. Oh, exactly. And that's one of the things, Anne, and Anne is in our membership group that we'll be talking about this month in our group, because different places, right? It's like no communication with the para, only communicate with the teacher. Other places, paras are allowed to communicate. And so that's something else to me, like homeschool communication is something that we talk about at IEP meetings. And so that would be another thing that you would request, and if you're requesting that at the IEP meeting and the district's, saying no, then there are certain ththings that you can do, right? Like look for their reasoning in the prior written notice. So yeah, there's all kinds of things, and that's why we're going to spend the whole month in our group talking about paraprofessionals. Um, because the other big thing I see as a need for training is, the level of prompts that paras are giving students, um, that we don't use natural supports like, for a student to watch, oh, everybody's putting their lunchbox away. I guess I'm supposed to do that. Like those natural cues that we want kids to pick up in the classroom. So there's no way that I'm advocating for a parent to have a chair beside your child and sit there all day. Or there's no way that I'm suggesting the parent take your kid to the back of the room at a separate table and work with them. So there's training around that, right? Like, how do we include, and how does a para give support and fade their support? And how does a para know that part of their job can also be helping other kids? So if a para's belief is, I'm supposed to be this kid's shadow, then I have to only work with him or her, and I have to be right there. So all of those things have to be talked about. And the other big thing, and if you have been on other shows, I say this a lot because it's important, is that a workshop, reading an article, watching a video, all of those can be components of training. But when I talk about training, I mean ongoing coaching, right? Because we have research that shows unless we have that ongoing coaching, teachers, paras, related service providers, they're not going to implement a new way of doing things if they don't have that ongoing support. So, the other thing that I really encourage families to do is to have the training really specifically defined in the IEP. And again, you'll get pushback for this, but it's like, we got to keep going. Is who's going to do the training? What that training looks like. Is it just a virtual? Is it watching, a YouTube video? What's the content going to be? What does the follow-up coaching look like? And have those components defined in the IEP. And I know this is the ideal world that I live in. And I also go to IEP meetings all the time. And I know that's not the ideal world that we get. But each time we write an IEP, we still have to be pushing that envelope. And this is one of the areas that I think we can do that, getting really specific definitions. So, speaking of definitions, I'm going to look over here because most of what you see about IDEA and even the Every Student Succeeds Act, both of those address paraprofessionals in a very slight way. Probably Every Student Succeeds Act does have a little bit more language in IDEA around parapros. But basically, the federal government leaves it up to the states to define, what does supervision by a certified staff member look like. So I currently live in Idaho, and I didn't know what Idaho's statute said about supervising paraprofessionals. So I said, I better find this out. So I'm going to look over here because I want to be accurate with how I word things. So what you'll see in federal language usually is something like paraprofessionals and assistants who are appropriately trained and supervised in accordance with state law. So then it's going to be like, okay, so how does my state law define supervision of professionals? So when I looked at the Idaho code, The Idaho Code language says paraprofessionals must work under the direct supervision of a properly certified staff member for the areas they are providing support. So in Idaho, and I bet a lot of states have similar language, paraprofessionals have to work under the direct supervision of a certified staff person. So then my advocacy brain goes to, well, how is direct supervision defined in our state law? So I looked that up. And it says refer to the paraprofessional handbook. To be honest, I didn't know our state had a paraprofessional handbook. I mean, I know they have a handbook for teachers for writing IEPs. I know there's rules and regs. I didn't know that there's a paraprofessional handbook. So I looked into the paraprofessional handbook. I'm learning a lot. So here, again, I'm going to refer over to my other screen so I'm accurate. This is the definition of direct supervision. All paraprofessionals, assistants, and aides must have a supervision plan developed by a certificated or licensed professional. So I guess in the supervision plan is where they spell out what direct supervision looks like. I wonder if you live in Idaho or if you look in your state law and you see that there's supposed to be a supervision plan, guess what? All of a sudden, this is like a new question that we can ask. It's like, I understand there's a what is it called? A supervision plan. I would love to see a copy of that, and that would help me understand what we're currently doing in our district. And, that would just be really helpful for me. Now, the other thing it says in the Idaho Code, so that's why you want to look up your state, it says that the paraprofessionals must provide instruction based on provided lesson plans. Now, I know when I was a teacher and I had paraprofessionals working in my class, I did not write specific lesson plans for them. I would hope that, that I provided support by talking with them, modeling, and things like that, but I didn't write lesson plans. And I don't know how many teachers in Idaho are writing lesson plans for Paris. So this little research project into what my state code was about paraprofessionals just like opened my eyes even more, because these are protections in our state law, and they're protections for the paras. I mean, the paras could be saying, excuse me, in our state law it says I'm provided lesson plans, or in our state law it says there's a supervision. Oh, you know what? Hello. You have to have your computer plugged in order to keep going. So, sorry. If you're back here with us live, I apologize. My computer went black. I thought the electricity went out. No, I just forgot to plug it in. So, where were we? We were talking about state code. And so I really encourage you to look up your state code. If you're in our Trailblazer group, that's a service that I offer. Is I'll help you find things in your state regs. So any of our Trailblazers that are here, just know that if you have trouble finding that, because sometimes all those things get buried in State Department websites, I will help you find that. And let's take. Allison says, good. This webinar is giving me so much specific direction and confidence to address parent training in the IEP. Thank you. Well, thank you, Allison. We love it. We love it. We love it. And Bronwyn says, what's the difference between a paraprofessional and an instructional assistant? Great question. And it depends on where you live. Most likely your state code, your state education code is going to have definitions, and sometimes those are right at the beginning of the code before they get into all the legalese language. But there's not one, national definition for paraprofessional and a different definition for instructional assistant. Some states do differentiate the two. Sometimes they'll call instructional assistants if they're getting Title I funding. Sometimes they're called paraprofessional if they're getting special ed funding for that position. So sometimes it's based on funding, sometimes it's based on whoever wrote the code at the time and what they thought. So yeah, you would just have to ask. You could ask the special ed director. And Kim, yeah, I keep getting connection or disconnected. Is it just me? Well, we had a big disconnection there when I forgot to plug my computer in. So hopefully you're here, Kim, and are seeing it. So let's see. You don't hear any sound? Oh, the sound is back. Okay. Yeah, my computer went blank out because I didn't have it plugged in, so I had to restart my computer. I apologize. So today, we talked about the training area for paras. And Susan, I know you were having an IEP meeting today. Let us know if you got anything kind of explained there. Because in her district, I think she said they're short like 63 para positions in the whole district. And it's like, so that's another question, right? So how is my child being supported if there's nobody hired to even fill this position? The other thing that we're going to be talking about the month of September, and Susan said we don't even have a para to train. Yeah, so first step, right? The hiring and the lack of availability is a huge issue. And there are no easy answers there, right? So yes, I don't have, I do have a magic wand, but I'm not sure it will help with the hiring crisis that we see in so many districts and states, right? It's like, so yeah, I feel for you, Susan. And one of the things I was going to say is when we do in our membership group, we have 3 trainings a month, and they're all on one topic. And so this month we're talking about paraeducators. In the past, we've we did a July training was all about universal design for learning. So, each month is a different topic, but I wanted to show you. So our first training is going to be, do they stay or do they go? When are they needed and for what? Um, because sometimes when I'm talking to families, I don't have a clear understanding of what the paraprofessional is, what support they're supposed to be giving and when they're giving it, and how they're fading and all those kinds of things. So as families, we have to be able to articulate the need for a paraprofessional. Is it just in the lunchroom because your child is susceptible to choking on food? And so for safety health reasons, we need eyes on him or her in the lunchroom from a para. That doesn't mean that that para has to be glued to your child the rest of the day, right? So we want to be really specific, and we also want to have that conversation with the general ed teacher, the special ed teacher, the para, yourself. Have this little mini conversation here. And if you reach any decisions that aren't written in the IEP, then request to amend the IEP, because I think these side conversations can be really helpful and we can get more done than sometimes at a formal meeting. The problem is, if we don't capture what the agreements were from these small conversations into the IEP, we're back to square one, where we're not going to be able to keep them accountable for what they promised or what we agreed to. So there's all kinds of things, right? Just general advocacy tips that we have to be aware of. And then our second training in September is going to be who's on first, who does what job when. And this is delineating the roles and the responsibilities. And a lot of states, and there's other checklists out there that you can use. And I'll be sharing some in our membership group about listing all the different things and then having a column, special ed teacher, para, general ed teacher, related service provider. And you go down there, and as a group, you actually discuss who's going to be providing the modifications, if they're needed, for the general ed classroom. And it might be special ed teacher and para clicked, or checked. But it's like, you got to be real clear. We can't expect all paras to have that knowledge of how to modify work. There's got to be conversations with the special ed and general ed teacher about what's coming up and how we can modify. But those details need to really be, checked off and understood by everybody. And then the third training that we're having this month in our membership group is about natural supports, because we don't talk about that enough. And it's not assigning somebody to be, it's not assigning another classmate to say, like, well, it's your job to help Johnny today. It's like, no, that's not natural supports. So our third training this month in the membership group is about natural supports and this big fancy thing called gradual release of responsibility. And so prompting comes into this whole concept of gradual release of responsibility, which is also another way to say fading. Because we have paras, we hardly ever talk about what's the plan to fade that para. And that plan to fade should be in the same conversation when we decide a para is needed. Because if you wait too long, that para doesn't ever start fading usually. So there's all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things. And I mean, just, being able to take a month and to focus on that topic, I think is going to be really helpful. So I encourage you, if you're interested, I would love for you to join us as a trailblazer. Right now, the cost is $27 a month. which is like I talk to other people and they're like, what? That's all you charge? Um, it's $27 a month to sign up for the September training. And if you want to continue, it would be $27 a month for the next training for the next month. But the thing is, in October, the price is going to go up to $37 a month. So if you're looking for a community of parents that believe in inclusive education and are wonderful supporters of each other and rally behind each other, if you're looking for that kind of a community, we have that with our Parent Trailblazer group. And you get lots of time where I'm live with you and you get to ask your personal individualized questions. So I encourage you to join. And before we leave today, I got to go back to Allison's question. Oops. So let's see, Allison. Okay. So let's go back here. 2 big social goals. So it says that Aid will attend the SLP one-on-one session, so she'll know what to do. We also have a rubric for the goals, and I'm asking for rubric data across settings twice a semester. But how do I find out more clearly exactly what techniques she'll be using? So yeah, you have to have a conversation, right? And ask those kinds of questions. And, because and actually the whole concept of gradual release of responsibility is something that fits in here perfectly, because it's like you watch somebody, and someone models something for you, so they're doing it but you're watching. But if that's the only level that they get of watch me and then next time you can do it, it probably isn't going to work so well. So there needs to be a richer plan of training, because this seems like the only avenue they have for training is for the aide to watch the one-on-one sessions and then, I assume be off on their own or something. So yeah, that's not going to cut it. And depending on the para and the skills and the strengths that the para has, that's where that individualized training comes in, because you want to see, does the para really understand, I don't know, tongue placement for artic kinds of things, but she really hasn't had experience helping students with pragmatic language skills. So that's the area that we need to boost. So you have to look at what the para's strengths are, what their needs are, and then individualize the training. But it's got to be more than just modeling, because that's not going to be implemented that well, probably. And then the rubric. So are you saying, so there's a rubric for your child's IEP goals? So that's good. Sometimes that's helpful. But you really want to know what techniques they're using. So I don't know, Allison, if you have some kind of a, form that you use for a back and forth communication log. A lot of teachers these days are, using apps like Class Dojo, which I'm not a fan of some of those features on those apps. But so it depends. But if you have a way, do you have email established as that's the way you're going to ask questions? That's really helpful, because you're going to get emails back and you're going to have something in writing. But yeah, you have to say, like, this part is really helpful. I'm glad that we're getting the information off the rubric, but I still don't have a picture of exactly what techniques, what strategies are being used. And, please help me understand this better. So yeah, I would start by asking questions. And if you know me, that's my go-to strategy a lot, is ask more questions. Okay, let's see if you have some more comments here. Um, Yeah. When I was saying, add this to your advocacy list. And I know Anne Marie, is it you're on a district or a statewide like advisory council? So sometimes those are good places to bring up more wide range like policy issues. Um, and Renee says that Lee's para was glued to him. Yeah, yeah, that's not research based practice of using an adult in the classroom. So yeah, that's got a lot of problems. And Anne Marie says, great point, ongoing trading. And Anne Marie says, using state regulations is useful if a school says we don't do that here. For example, with para, if the para is defined as support, then the parents can use this to defend their request for a para. Yeah. So, I think that's one of the things that I've learned as a parent and an advocate is there are all kinds of other ways that we can approach things. I think our number one go to is to look at what IDEA, the federal law, says and read the federal regulations. And I'm not an attorney, so I can't give you legal advice. I, I have to throw my disclaimer in there. Um, but yeah, so there's IDEA that you can use when you're advocating. There's things like, you know, Section 504 of those, civil rights law. There is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which some of you might remember from being called No Child Left Behind. When it gets reauthorized, it usually gets renamed. But the Every Student Succeeding Act really has some great information and parts in there about training for staff. So that's something else you can pull in as far as these. This is the guidance that we're looking at that we get from the federal level. How can we make sure that gets implemented in our school? Um, and it's not that you're going to go into every meeting going, well, I just looked up the state code and guess what it said? There's this finesse to being an advocate. And so, yeah, you don't want to go in guns blazing because if you know the whole concept of flipping your lid, if you go in with your guns blazing, you have flipped your lid, and the other people in the room have also flipped their lid, so that's not going to be helpful. But yeah, there's a continuation of lots of information we all need to get right. So anything else? Allison says thanks, and I can tell them they need to do fidelity checks once a semester or something. Yeah, yeah. So there are lots of resources. The other thing that I've been compiling is resources from organizations like the National Education Association. The TIES Center from the University of Minnesota has great resources about support for parents too. So I've been compiling those, and we have a resource library in our group. And so those things you can find in our Trailblazer resource library. So, any other questions or comments? I love this discussion. And like I said, we don't talk about paraprofessionals enough. And this is something that's like critically important, right, for our kids' benefit. So, anything else for the good of our day? So, yeah, Renee says that her son had died on several occasions and was brought back when his friends were screaming to tell the teacher, Lee is having a seizure. I wasn't playing. His friends knew to call 911 immediately. Yeah, there are some and that's like a huge thing, right? That medical know-how of when you call for support. So there's all kinds of areas that you want to make sure the people working with your child are aware of, and the most important ones are those health and safety um, parts of your child, and sharing what the staff needs to be prepared to do. So that's huge. Well, thank you so much for being here live or watching the replay. I'm Charmaine Thaner. I am here because I'm passionate about helping families become even more effective advocates for their children. I wish by now there was not a need for special education advocates. I wish I had worked myself out of a job. Uh, but I'm just now looking for young people like you to take the baton on, because there is a lot of work we got to keep on keeping on, right? So until the next time, watch my page. I think this fall, it's 3 weeks out of the month that we'll be live here. But watch our page, Visions and Voices Together, and you'll get notification. So thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And make sure you thank a paraprofessional today. If you have one, right, Susan? We need to have paraprofessionals.